Allow me to introduce myself. I am Mohib Assar and I will be your host for the day. Now, today we're running two parallel tracks at the same time. Here in this hall is the Digital Transformation Forum, and in the next hall is the Media and Advertising Forum. This track will cover discussions about the best practices for digital transformation across sectors and opportunities for innovators in different industries. Please do stick around for the rest of the day to know who are the winners of the Startup Battle, Ideathon competition, and the Creative Combat competition, which will take place in Hall A as well. Also, I'd like to invite you to download the app ArabNet Beirut 2018 to know what's going on throughout the day. Now, without any further ado, we will kick off the day with our first panel discussion titled Opportunities in Education Institutions Embarking on Digital Adoption. Please help me welcome to the stage the moderator of this session, Raneem Mourad, the Managing Director at Kashida.
Hello. All right, that's better. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to actually call you guys up on stage to join me so I don't feel very alone. I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves one at a time. So as the introduction said, we're here today to talk a little bit about the digital transformation and adoption of technology in the classroom for teachers and students, and to understand a little bit more about how that affects the learner, most of all. So I'm going to start with allowing you guys to introduce yourselves. So Phil, maybe we can start with you and go down the line.
Okay, so, sorry, is this working? So my name's Phil Redhead. I work for GEMS Education in Dubai. We have 50 schools in Dubai, serving around 120,000 students there, and also operate in 14 countries around the world, in total serving around 250,000 students. So the mission of the company is to put quality education in the hands of every child, which is quite a goal. The chairman, Sunny Varkey, wants to impact 500 million children around the world. That we know that's not going to be possible in brick and mortar schools, and they won't all be GEM students in the traditional sense. So part of our role in the Innovation Research and Development Unit, of which I'm part, is to envision and deliver new models of education beyond our brick and mortar schools, as well as improving learner outcomes and curriculum provision within our existing schools across the world.
My name is Greg MacGilpin. I'm the head of school at the American Community School right here in Beirut. Our school was founded in 1905. We're over 113 years old, and we serve students ages 3 through the senior year in high school. We're 1,200 students. We have been a traditional brick and mortar school, and we've been looking at a transformation, how we go from a school that is served locally to empowering students to solve problems around the world. We serve over 60 nationalities, both in here in Lebanon, in the region, and around the world. And much as Phil said, we're trying to think about how to empower those students to think beyond just the local community.
Morning, Ghassan Kansou. I'm the Vice President for Academic Development at SABIS, also known as the Shweifat Schools. Our story goes back to 1886 in a small school in a village just south of Beirut, and we serviced 20 young girls at the time. Our story is expanded. We're currently now in 20 countries on 5 continents. We serve a little over 70,000 students worldwide. We're both in public and private education and run different models in each of those. Our story with technology really started back in the early 70s on different levels of digitizing school procedures and school management processes, and then has really been a continuous growth since then. Something I guess we'll be talking a little more about over the course of this panel.
So we need to rethink how we get our students to integrate with technology. How do they use it? How do we use it in our teaching programs? So I'm going to start with the easiest question, and I would like maybe start with you, Ghassan. How did you integrate technology into your classrooms? Maybe we'll stick to the 2000s and not go back then, because technology's changed a lot since. But what kind of technology do you use? Are we talking whiteboards? Are we talking Moodle, LMSs? Maybe give us a bit of a brief of how SABIS does that.
Right, so the view about what to introduce with technology really has been, you really start with your mission and your vision for what you want to implement at your school, and then try to find the right technology that marries up with that. And so initially it started off with digitized assessments to see how we could really get visibility into the learning process and seeing how well students were progressing through analyzing their progress and their performance. And as the technology improved, and you find that in the mid-2000s, I would say, the interactive whiteboards started hitting the market and prices became very affordable, we started seeing that those made their way into the classrooms. So this really helped improve on instruction and instructional design from the teacher's viewpoint and looking at the classroom as a whole. And so developing content based on those whiteboards became key. The way that SABIS does it is that we have our own R&D divisions, and we develop our own software and content.
Okay.
So it makes it a little easier to integrate that kind of content with the hardware and with the technology that comes along. And really it matches up with the school's philosophy and methodology for instruction. And as that became more available, we found that, and as technology improved and tablets became more predominant, we started seeing tablets make their way into the classrooms. And so today, out of the school-aged children who are able to handle tablets, we start as early as second grade, in addition to having a hybrid approach where there are certain printed books that are also in use. So really seeing what students can or can't handle and what needs to be still in the traditional format versus something more digital. As far as the uptake for students, that really has been quite seamless. I think kids today are more than happy using the technology, definitely more than us adults. So that really hasn't been a problem. The challenge has been trying to see how the whole community can embrace it and can actually roll it out. And if I look at the past couple of years and where that's developed, we're beginning to see more engagement with online platforms, virtual learning, and then making sure that students can connect with their learning at home and make sure that connects with what they've done at school as well. So your local data becomes synchronized with your cloud-based data, and then they can go back and follow up with that at home.
And just before we move to Greg, how did that go with the parents? Because you said at home, they take iPads home, etc. Parents are not used to this kind of schooling. So, and then I'd like you guys to also answer that as well.
Right, so that's also been a process. I'd say for the past 5 or 6 years, we developed a web-based solution for parents, so they can log in and look at all aspects of the school life, where they can engage with either the school community and look at their students or their kids' performance, their grades, activities, and really look at all facets of what they do. And more recently, over the past 2 years, I would say we released a mobile app where push notifications come back to your mobile device, and you can see absences or behavior issues or performance results or awards given to students right on your phone. So if I think of my 3 kids at school, they're not really happy by the fact that I can tell what's happening with their day-to-day.
Black Mirror.
Yeah, but at least you can choose the level of engagement that you want as a parent, and then decide how that goes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sometimes I don't know if I want to know all that information
Yeah.
from my 3 children. ECS did a lot of that early on, where we realized, first and foremost, the technology was really about the administrative and what was making teachers' lives stronger. But we also found that there are some people in your community that want to early adopt and really push the envelope. And I think one thing that the school has done well is allow those people the freedom and the creativity to practice. So we would have certain classrooms that would actually go a little bit faster than the rest of the community. and then report back or give back. This is what we learned, this is what worked, this is what didn't. In 2007, 2009, my apologies, we decided in grades 6 through 12 to do a bring your own device to school, so all students from grade 6 on. We decided that naturally at our school was a transition period where all students were ready for the technology. It's always debatable about when and where they are, and I think that age has dropped down quite a bit in the last few years. So all of our students bring in their own devices. We decided not to say this is the only device because we found a lot of our population already had access to it, and so we wanted to merge what they're comfortable with our learning. And then we implemented a learning management system that was integrated with our website, and in the last 3 years have really looked in particularly our middle and high school toward labs and areas of workshops that are often called makerspaces that allow students to really think beyond a sort of sit and get idea, that the students are actually creating the learning and a little bit more personalized.
Okay.
In terms of families, we've also tried to, as much as possible, give them as much information through a learning management system. We're wrestling right now, today in 2018, of whether we want that everyday information given to parents. They want it,
Yeah.
particularly the parent group that we're working with, and we just wondered, is that the best environment for learning? Do children need enough time in between to make the mistakes and not worry about the adults every moment telling them, you need to shift, you need to shift?
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay. I think we all have 3 children each, right? So we're doing our bit for the enrollments side of things. So like Greg, I think our journey was organic, going back 10, 15 years. So I myself was a teacher, started with GEMS as a teacher in a school. I was a primary school teacher. And it was very much sort of, radical practice in schools, just teacher by teacher, trying things out, seeing what would work. Not very strategic, but I think that was necessary, and there's still quite a lot of that going on. So, for example, we also instigated a bring your own device scheme in my school back in, I think, 2008. And we developed an app, a school app, with a company back in the UK in 2011, I believe. And then as soon as the iPad came out, we were at conferences trying to win an iPad because you couldn't buy them. So we were going to conferences and putting raffle tickets in and so on, trying to just get one iPad. So we deployed iPads in the school, and it was organic. So teachers were discovering different ways of doing things. We had our first attempt at corporate level when I was still in a school at a group learning management system, which was called the GEMS Learning Gateway, which wasn't particularly successful, I have to say. It was based on the Microsoft Learning Gateway that you may remember, which was very much a university level tool. And I remember parents in a workshop telling me at the time that, because I had to sell this thing and I didn't really believe in it myself. So I had parents who, because a lot of our parents, and I'm sure it's the same for you, are very well educated in high-flying tech jobs, and they have high expectations. So I remember one parent in particular telling me, this system, you need an engineering degree to make it work. Okay, so that's one of my top tips for later, actually, keep it as simple as possible. So it was organic. It was, pioneers, radical teachers doing different things. We moved away from the GLG in our school, the GEMS Learning Gateway, to actually run we ran a whole school in terms of the learning management on Blogger back in the day, because there was nothing else that we could find. It wasn't great for personalization. It was all open. Everybody could see everything. But what it did do was get students collaborating, and everybody could see each other's learning, and it was great for peer assessment, teacher online assessment and so on. This was before Google Apps, certainly before Google Apps for Education. So when Google Docs came out, that was, well, we actually toyed with Google Wave. Anyone remember Google Wave, which was the forerunner of Google Apps, which failed miserably. So it's sometimes nice to see Google fail, right?
Yeah.
Just to say, you're in a good place. Yeah. We have to be able to fail to get better. And if it hadn't been for Google Wave, they wouldn't have sort of acquired the technology that led to Google Apps. So when that came out, that was transformational. It was the first time students could really have learning organized and managed within a secure system and really get them collaborating online. So what we're trying to do now is move from the organic while still keeping that, because we need to keep our teachers innovating and pushing the boundaries, but becoming now more strategic. So we have a detailed digital strategy which covers all aspects of school operations, from data to people and professional learning, leadership, curriculum assessment, pedagogy, communication, parent engagement. So it's a holistic strategy, and our challenge is managing the complexity, sort of taking the complexity of it all on our shoulders, but making the end user's experience incredibly simple in terms of students, teachers, and parents. So, and talking of parents, I think, in those early days, we're not getting so much resistance now. I think, there's a real groundswell of opinion that among the parents we need to move and we need to change. But I remember back in the early days when we started our first Bring Your Own Device program, I had a parent in the school office shouting at me, about that far from my face, screaming at me that she'd had to cancel her holiday, and all her friends had too, because we'd asked them to buy a $200 laptop for their child. Maybe it was a little bit early, but we're not seeing that so much now.
Okay.
So we've implemented a really sort of deep engagement program with our parents around digital citizenship and curriculum to get the message across. So it's about constantly communicating that message.
Okay. And I'm hearing a lot, and maybe you talked a little bit about the challenges, but I'll also ask that question a little bit later. But I wanted to go a bit into content. So we talked a lot about tablets, LMS, whiteboards, technology being implemented in the schools. But if the content doesn't kind of match up with these technology implementations, then maybe we're not actually doing the best we can. So I wanted to ask you two questions. One, how do you feel about how do you think STEM and STEAM, currently being very important in education and the trend of education, have affected the way content is provided, especially now that we have the technologies to use that? And two, what is the relationship with publishers who traditionally have been the content providers for schools, and how has that changed with technology and any challenges you faced with them? So would you like to?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it is interesting. So STEM is leading into STEAM nowadays.
Yeah.
So the arts are definitely being catered for. And you see that through programs like your robotics, your web design, your application design. So it's not just about the code and about the science itself, but also about the design elements and about making sure those gel together and they jive together. So that's definitely seen a bigger uptake between different members of the school community, looking at boys and girls, adults and younger students. And so there's definitely an excitement around that. And the advantage of having everyone's separate tablets and devices is that everybody can be a programmer, everybody can design something. So it really does connect with what students expect. The last thing you want is a curriculum that does one thing at school, but then have kids go off and use a third-party software that then gives them and provides them something a lot different. So really trying to connect the content with what your school's curriculum does is key. In our situation, we designed the curriculum so we can be attuned to the different needs and what is out there. But I think in terms of challenges with publishers and providers, and we were in that discussion a little earlier, talking about the R&D process that those big publishers and the big software design, educational software design companies going through, is that they're really on one pace. And unfortunately, many schools are not at the expected receiving end, if you like. And so there is a pressure for schools to try and provide technology and be digital on their campuses. But if that's not connected with the offering and what the school stands for, then it just becomes technology for technology.
Yeah.
And so you want to make sure that it does match up with your philosophy and what you're about as a school. And so, yes, the publishers have provided a lot of content, but it's also wise to advise against just throwing in videos and animations and things that may seem appealing to students, but could actually be time consuming and maybe not for everybody. So it really is a balancing act between seeing what is out there and really seeing what you choose to offer as a school.
Okay. And would you say being a network and being able to have this R&D department has helped you achieve that? And then I want to ask you, Greg, how is that different as a single school? What would be the,
Right.
challenges?
The way we operate it is that it's centrally developed, so we take all curriculum decisions and software decisions, tech decisions at head office, and then implement that model. Of course, it's done through a pilot, through running a project, and then seeing, debugging, if you like, the process, and then rolling it out network-wide. And so decisions really do tend to be studied ahead of time and then rolled out. There's obviously quite a bit of room for the individual school to make its own, if you like, creative process and embed it, but then that goes back to the original design and then gets rolled out again. So as a network, we're able to do that. We actually embrace the technology for ensuring quality across schools. So that's part of our reason for taking up the technology, is that we can ensure that a classroom that's running in Dubai for a 5th grade classroom in English can be similar in how that runs in Lebanon or in Phoenix, Arizona, or in Frankfurt, Germany. Is that those wise decisions and best practices can be implemented in similar situations. And the technology can provide you with the consistency and stability for running it. So I guess to each their own, but that's how we've designed it and implemented it.
Okay.
It's an independent entity.
Yeah.
I would go to that second question. First, we do have a curriculum that we implement at the school through a set of standards both from the United States and also locally here in Lebanon. The struggle we have often is that we do offer a lot of autonomy with our teachers in how they instruct. And when we use any outside resource from a publisher, there's a lack of training. So you're alluding to this. You have this content that's well-researched, well-researched, but the particular needs of our community might not meet that R&D at all.
Yeah.
So we spend much more, actually our budget for professional learning is larger than our technology budget. And in terms of percentage of the overall our operating costs. Because we really think ultimately with our particular situation, it's the teachers that will be using this technology, whether it's high-tech or low-tech, for the implementation. And we don't see a lot of that professional learning from the publishers being provided. So actually, maybe a niche for those publishers is put a little bit more money into the training aspect.
Okay. And when it comes to, you were telling me earlier that your middle school has become this open space, and you focus a lot on science and maths and the non-traditional
Right,
learning.
I wasn't speaking a whole lot about this. Yeah, so in our middle school, we do have a STEAM program.
Yeah.
And the physical space that we chose to, we were actually doing a lot of STEAM integration before we had the space for it, just basically students and teachers using every physical part of the school as possible. But then through a grant that we applied for, we were able to reimagine what the space looks like. So today our middle school science, our STEAM wing, is all open space with a couple of specific spaces for workshops and robotics lab, but everything else is open-ended, and the idea behind that is students are learning at a different pace than one teacher in front of the room saying, this is what you're going to learn.
Okay, thank you.
And that takes takes a lot of a combination of training from the outside and time for our own teachers to explore what works and then iterate what doesn't work.
Yeah, so it's an iterative process.
Yeah.
Phil, if you want to,
Okay, so it's a minefield, I believe. the content there. I conducted a content audit about 6 years ago for GEMS, and I ended up with a spreadsheet with 25,000 entries of different content providers and tools that were being used across the group. So again, going back to the old GEMS Learning Gateway days, it was back in the time when it was felt that content was king. And GEMS had bought a certain number, they partnered with a certain number of content providers such as Britannica, EduRite and so on to provide the same content for all schools, and it just didn't work. When we looked at the return on investment, at something like Britannica, which is not a bad tool, and it's got a lot better. It's quite a good resource now. But at the time, there were only 7% of the potential users actually using that resource regularly. And it was a huge investment for, at the time, around 80,000 students. So a decision was made then to give our schools as much autonomy as possible. So we moved from a central resourcing model to an advisory and evaluation service in terms of the corporate function. So we now partner with companies such as 1776 out of the States, an accelerator, an incubator, and Innovate My School in the UK, who help us to find the best content and tools that are out there that match our needs. So we work with partners and make sure they get to know us, which is critical, right, in terms of not just the training, but also knowing our business, knowing our students. We have, it may be unique, I think we have 5 different curricula that we provide, which is very challenging. So we have US, IB, 2 Indian curricula, we have local curricula around the world thrown in, and of course the UK as well. So that's where the complexity comes in. So we've developed a very thorough return on investment evaluation tool that all content providers have to go through in terms of the systems change, whether it fits in with our current systems, the potential to impact outcomes, which is critical for our students in terms of the clear outcomes we've set. But really importantly, again, is the need for these partners, whether they're the Microsofts of this world or a startup out of Bulgaria, they have to partner with us, they have to work with us on a constant, ongoing basis so that they know our needs and work with our teachers and leaders to make sure they're developing along the same track as ourselves. So it's about that partnership. So Microsoft is one of our big partnerships. We've just signed a major MOU with Microsoft, and we're running an Internet of Things program in our schools along with them. But we also have very small partners. There's a company called Kinteract out of the UK, and they provide a portfolio building tool and a personalized learning journey with a recommendation engine in there. So it's around machine learning, and that's really just 3 guys sitting in an office in Oxford churning out crazy new things. So if you compare them to Microsoft, it shows the sort of the breadth of partner that we work with, and that's a challenge in itself. It would be lovely just to say, right, Microsoft, come and do everything for us, but no one can. So we need the little guys as well, because some of the best stuff comes out of these startups.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing from all of you is that actually when it comes to content or publishers, it's no longer kind of a top-down as it was traditionally where, okay, these are the books you're going to teach in school. Even with the students, it's kind of an iterative process with the teachers, with the content providers, with the technology that you use, that you kind of test what's best for your strategy and how it works best for your learning experience, and you cater the content accordingly. And even whether it's a network or a single school, you're all kind of going through that process. So what would you say, if very, very briefly, like the one main challenge that you had going forward with this integration of digital technology, and do you feel that cultural closeness or differences has affected that integration? Because right now, as you know, like people are connected to the world, so how do you bring that cultural vastness to schooling, and to what are the key challenges with that, basically? And maybe we'll start with you, Phil, and go the other way this time.
Okay, so I think we're still very much in that position where I think schools get it, school leaders get it. Greg's tagline, I just wrote it down here when he sent me an email last night, and I'll just sing your praises here, Greg, if you don't mind. Underneath his email signature, he talks about his school and that it empowers students to solve problems with creativity and integrity, to lead well-balanced lives, and to serve Lebanon and the world community with understanding and compassion, which I think is just fantastic. We could probably leave it there. But that's not what state curricula do.
Yeah.
It's really not what state curricula do, especially if you come from the UK where they're going backwards and going back to the 3 R's and not the 7 C's, if you like. So the challenges, I believe, for us and maybe all schools, depending on where you are, is to bring the technology in to meet the requirements of state curricula, because schools, they still need to provide the exam results. The expectation is you'll still get your 40 plus points in IB, you'll still get your A stars in A level, you'll still get this GPA and to get into Harvard and so on. So, but we have to be doing so much more than that. So it's the tension between the state curricula, which doesn't need technology. You don't need any technology in a school to get 3 A stars at A level or 45 IB points, pretty much. Okay? You can plow through a curriculum with books and a chalkboard and get 3 A stars, which is crazy. So convincing schools and certainly principals to shift when their positions and their reputations and their own families and their own financial security actually depends on something that doesn't require technology is tricky. We may be more fortunate than some places in the UAE in that the actual inspection framework, which drives pretty much everything schools do, has undergone a significant transformation in the past few years. So innovation is now a key part of that. So schools are actually inspected relentlessly every year. And one of the key indicators, or it actually runs through the inspection framework now, is the need to develop innovation skills in students, which is a big change for us.
Yep.
And it's something we don't see in inspection frameworks around the world. So it's a positive sign, the seeds of growth in terms of policymakers and regulators actually recognizing that this is necessary, and it's not just about the 3 R's anymore and the traditional component of the curriculum.
Agreed. There are major challenges. Maybe one of the areas we're struggling with is the shift, and you alluded to it, from teaching in schools has always been the center. Good teaching, good instruction, the people, and we don't want to move away from that, but with technology is disrupted in a way that actually our shift has been toward learning, and how are the students who have access to every piece of information you ever need. Much like you said, you don't really need you don't need new technology, but from one way to meet the requirements of university. On the other hand, it's fairly scary for families to realize that the traditional jobs that have shown success are no longer the only jobs available. And then how do you teach and learn in schools that will be vastly different than the adults there now? For the past 100 years, the way the adults acted would ensure success for the students. And I don't think that's the case anymore, and that's scary. That's scary for the adults who are working in schools right now and those who are leading those adults. So I think that's a big challenge, is that we're not really sure. It's exciting, I think, to be in education and a lot of other fields, but I think that's a major challenge. No one really knows 20 years. They're no more doctor, they'll be like doctor, lawyer, engineer, but there's so much more now, and the way you empower students to be excited about their future is a little bit different. Our tagline was not me by any stretch. There's a whole community believing in it, and another challenge is continually aligning your community to believe in that idea.
I think Greg and Phil have covered most of it, but in essence, yes, authorizers and external exam boards are definitely not moving as fast as expectations, or governments for that part. If you look at the national curriculum in Lebanon, there's little to no ICT expectations within the program, and you can't be throwing the blame there. It's just that schools have to have their own initiatives and really get students to get the skills expected. The other challenge, and I guess it was alluded to, is this change management idea, and that really getting all the school community on board. the kids have no problem with the technology. I think we have a challenge in making sure we provide them something as fast as the pace that they are exposed to it at school or outside of it. It's the adults that tend to need to get the encouragement, the security of knowing that they're going to get the PD followed through and make sure that we can train them on that. But it really is coming along. The issue comes in with the disparity between both public and private schools, and then with the haves and have-nots, with those that have the budgets and don't. And you start seeing that gap form. And so, that is obviously a bigger problem to try and address, but that will create problems down the line. Hopefully, are being addressed by policymakers or otherwise.
So
What's just,
do
you mind, what's fascinating is, you touched on something that's a really important thing to express, that the have and have-nots in terms of the people teaching. But I've been in different events over the last few months in Beirut that were showcasing different schools around Lebanon, and they were using real low-tech, low-cost materials and really creating something innovative, just as innovative as any of our schools are providing at low cost. I think, but the investment needs to be in the training of those people, those adults and students, to allow the time and space to do that. Right? People often, and we talked about it, it's not the amount of money investing in actually the equipment. I was telling them that you could have too many 3D printers or too many high-tech items, but it's that interest and understanding at the low-tech level that often you see some real innovation, and it does not matter where you come from.
Yeah, and I think there are solutions, and if we get a chance, maybe we can touch on some, but...
Yeah. Well, the next I wanted to talk about is actually what the future you foresee for this, especially with these challenges, and some of the things we were talking about before, for example, teacher training. So do we need to kind of think about that from now? People who go to school to become teachers, how much are we integrating digital technology into their education so that when they come to schools that are integrated with technology, how seamlessly do they fall into that role? How do policies have to change within the schooling system? And what kind of future do you foresee for education in general? Will we not have the traditional schooling system? Maybe. Yeah. Maybe we'll all close now.
I think that's it's definitely worth thinking about what happens to the job market, I don't know, to kids who are enrolling in schools today, right? I mean, they'll hit the job market in 2035, 2040, and what will the world look like then? I think it'd be presumptuous for any of us to try and picture the world then, but you need to be thinking about what you need to equip students with to be able to deal with the world then. So this constant re-engineering of their knowledge is something they're going to have to do. Gone are the days when you'll go get your degree and then hit the job market and be set for the next 20 years of your career. I think you're going to have to go back and re-engineer what you know, given the technological advances that are happening and where the world is at that point in life. And I think the silver lining behind all of this is that if you look at where today's technology on, whether it's virtual realities or looking at AIs and machine learning, I think solutions based on adaptive, personalized technologies are really going to be the way forward coming into this. So already in many industries, this has taken shape. And I see that education is definitely going to have its fair share, where you can log into your screen and really your learning pathway is mapped out based on whatever responses you have with that machine. You can go back to prerequisites, you can move at the pace that you want, and really that will shape up what schools look like. Will we have schools in this traditional sense 5, 10 years down the line? Is it going to be more personalized, more individualized, and then having social clubs where kids meet and greet and have their social impact versus schools that does that
and is it going to be in physical spaces?
So already this idea of virtual schools does exist. That market is growing in the US. Kids are sitting at home, but then they are in a virtual school. The homeschooling market's taken off, and that's also a big market. And I think with the existing technology today, that is feasible. It's just finding the right kind of setup where that makes social and real time, if you like, sense today. So it's exciting, and the technology is helping us drive it. And I think we're going to see some very interesting changes in the next 3 to 5 years
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Do you guys like to add anything about that, about the way you see the future of learning and
I think there'll still
removing
be
the walls?
there'll still be that tension about how to, when you're talking about young people, adolescents, how to give them the opportunities to interact face-to-face, interact in the social circles and in social environment. Because school for forever has been that one of those the places, if not the only place where that's occurred. And we need to figure out how to mix that in with all the technologies that are coming on. I do, as we said earlier, all the information is now accessible. Any one of us can do it right now on our phone. We can get any information, any piece of information that we want to. And so our students, our children in the next 20 years are going to have to figure out how to adapt to that.
And they're telling us time's almost up, so maybe just in a few words, one tip or insight about the future that you would have. Or a tip about how does someone integrate maybe digital learning in their schools?
Yeah, I think just to follow up on that first, I think, you know, we heard yesterday about industry needs and jobs of the future and so on, and there was a speaker yesterday said students from universities are coming out having been taught IT skills, but they don't know how to work. They don't know how to do a job, how to manage their time, how to work in a team, how to meet deadlines, how to deal with conflict, and so on, and management skills. So I think what we teach, the content of the curriculum and the outcomes has to change, and it is changing now, despite the traditional curriculum still being there from policymakers. And that will change how we organise learning. So we're doing this in GEMS now in terms of getting students to work on real-world projects for months at a time, even up to a year at a time, through initiatives such as the Global Innovation Challenge, where we challenge students to solve some of the grand challenges of the world and link that to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, so that they're working constantly. They have to demonstrate and learn all of the key skills that they actually need in the workforce. So all the soft skills, all of the teamwork skills, you know, the self-management and the self-discipline skills as well, meeting deadlines and so on, managing their own time, rather than this crazy idea of you go into a lesson for 50 minutes or an hour, and the inspector comes in to check that they've learnt something within that hour, which is just crazy. We don't have someone in real life checking what did you do in the last hour, and judging them on that, judging the teacher on that, judging the quality of education on that. So it's about, I think, how we reorganise learning, and that will dictate the skills our teachers need and the model of education as well.
Thank you. Would you guys like to add anything? I think.
Make sure the environment that you're creating it allows for innovation. Make sure it allows for innovation, which means that you can't have compliant environments. So many classrooms around the world, even in our school, are based on compliance. And if you're going to innovate and have students who are going to be problem solvers, you need to have environments that allow for innovation.
Yeah. I mean, just advice for anybody looking to implement the technology. There's a lot of it out there. Choose wisely what you think fits your model, and then go after implementing it. Make sure everyone's on board, and then that trickles down to every member of that school. Otherwise, you're going to run into the hiccups that we may have encountered as we did this years ago. So, but yeah, I'd like to flip the question to a positive, really, not so much as a challenge, but rather to embrace it, because I think with the changes that are happening, with the fact that no matter where you are in the world, you have access to a mobile phone or some kind of mobile device. And if the systems drive that process down the line, I think every individual, every kid around the world can have access to it. And that's going to be the way of the future, I think.
I couldn't agree more, yeah. Thank you. So that's it for us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.